racist pilot kicks black billionaire woman off plane. Turns out her dad owns the airline. In this video, we explore the deeper issues at play, how systemic racism and unchecked authority intersect in spaces like the aviation industry. This isn't just about one man's actions, it's a microcosm of larger, ongoing struggles faced by people of color in environments where power and privilege often go unchecked. What happens next will leave you stunned. Will Captain Richard Blake face the consequences of his actions, or will his privilege shield him from accountability? And what role will Elena Carter's father, the influential and powerful CEO of the airline, play in setting things right? Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video for more people to see this story. Get ready to uncover the twists and turns of a story that goes far beyond a single flight. It's a story about resilience, the fight for justice, and the demand for systemic change. Stay tuned as we delve into the events that transformed a painful moment into a rallying cry for inclusion and accountability. And we're back. We are flying through an opening in the shadow of the planes to live by together by Ramona Thompson. The airport was alive with its usual pre-flight chaos. Passengers hurried through the terminal, luggage in tow, while last-minute boarding calls echoed over the loudspeakers. Behind the counters, airline staff worked diligently, managing the ebb and flow of travelers. Among the crowd was Elena Carter, a prominent black billionaire entrepreneur, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit and carrying herself with quiet confidence. She strode with friendliness and confidential look around, and she had just wrapped up an intense business meeting and was eager to return home. Her first-class ticket was in hand, a seat she had earned many times over through her hard work and success. As Elena approached her gate, she felt a sense of relief, knowing she was moments away from boarding. But that relief quickly dissipated when an airline employee stopped her. "Ma'am, your seat isn't available. You'll need to move," the employee said, her voice a mix of apology and nervousness. Ariel smiled, glad they were in the same cabin and felt the same sense of alone. Elena frowned, holding out her boarding pass. "What do you mean? My seat is confirmed. It's printed right here." Her tone was calm but firm, not expecting the encounter to escalate further. The employee hesitated, glancing over her shoulder, as if seeking guidance. "I'm really sorry, but there's been a mix-up. We'll need you to sit elsewhere," she stammered. Before Elena could press further, a tall white man in a crisp pilot's uniform appeared. Captain Richard Blake introduced himself, his demeanor far from welcoming. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Yes," Elena replied, holding up her ticket. "This is my seat. I paid for it, and I'm not moving." The girl now faced her brother, and they both stared down at him. Captain Blake barely glanced at her ticket before shaking his head dismissively. "No, you're mistaken. That seat is taken," he said, his tone cold and authority. Elena's heart raced, but she refused to back down. "I've flown first class on this airline dozens of times. This is my reserve seat." The captain's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I don't have time for this. You're causing a scene. Either you leave the seat now, or I'll have you removed from the plane. The price is clear." Passengers nearby fell silent, their curiosity turning to unease as the tension grew. Some whispered among themselves, while others watched in stunned disbelief. Despite the pressure, Elena stood her ground. "I'm not doing anything wrong. You can't remove me just because you feel like it." Flint glanced behind him, saw Pacer in the hall. Flint sensed her hesitation. At that moment, Captain Blake's patience snapped. "I don't care who you are," he barked, his voice echoing through the cabin. "Move, or I'll have security escort you out." The two soldiers looked. The confrontation escalated quickly. Elena, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief, held her ground, unwilling to let the blatant injustice slide. But Captain Blake was relentless. Within moments, 2 security officers arrived and forcefully escorted Elena off the plane. Crouching in the privacy of the plane, As she was led down the narrow jet bridge, Elena felt the weight of humiliation pressing down on her. Her heart pounded, and her shoulders ached not just from the physical force used against her, but from the emotional toll of being treated as though she didn't belong. Passengers inside the plane sat frozen, some visibly shocked by what they had witnessed, but no one dared intervene. Standing alone on the tarmac, Elena watched as the plane's doors closed with a heavy finality. She felt a mixture of anger, disbelief, and helplessness, but beneath the surface, something else stirred a deep resolve. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about being treated as less than, despite all she had achieved. As the plane taxied away, Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and saw a familiar name, her father, Gregory Carter, the CEO of the airline. Taking a deep breath, she answered, determined to ensure that this injustice wouldn't be ignored. The incident wasn't over. It was just beginning. Standing on the tarmac, her breath still uneven from the ordeal, Elena Carter felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and saw the name that had always brought her a sense of stability. Gregory Carter, her father. Gregory wasn't just any man. He was the CEO of the very airline whose pilot had humiliated her. But at that moment, Elena didn't feel like the daughter of one of the most influential men in the country. She groaned in despair and reluctantly checked for messages. She felt small, angry, and deeply humiliated. Swallowing hard, she answered the call. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. Her eyes flew. "Elena," Gregory's voice was calm yet commanding, laced with concern. "What happened?" A deep breath, recounting the events. "The pilot, Captain Richard Blake, pushed me out of my seat, Dad. He dismissed me like I didn't matter, like I didn't belong there. He didn't even try to hide his disdain." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then Gregory's tone shifted. "This isn't just about you, Elena. This is about something bigger. They need to understand who they're dealing with, and more importantly, they need to be held accountable." Gregory Carter wasn't a man who took injustice lightly. As a self-made billionaire and a trailblazer in the tech industry, he had spent his life fighting for opportunities not just for himself, but for others who looked like him. This incident, however, was deeply personal. His daughter, who had followed in his footsteps with resilience and determination, had been publicly humiliated in a way that no one should endure. For Elena, the sting of the incident wasn't just about the physical act of being removed from the plane. It was the look in Captain Blake's eyes, the sheer dismissal, as though her success, her achievements, her very presence meant nothing. "I've worked my entire life to prove that I belong in spaces like that first-class seat," she said, her voice steadier now but still tinged with anger. "And in one moment, he treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter." But Elena wasn't one to dwell in despair. Beneath the humiliation was a spark of determination. "This isn't just about me," she said quietly. "What about the people who've been treated like this and didn't have a platform or someone to call? This can't happen again." Gregory, ever the strategist, responded with the precision that had built his empire. "We're not going to let this slide, Elena. I'll make sure of it. But we need to approach this smartly. This isn't just about one man or one airline. It's about the system that allows this kind of behavior to go unchecked." As the call ended, Elena felt a mix of emotions: anger at what had happened, gratitude for her father's support, and a growing sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about justice for herself. It was about making sure no one else had to endure what she had. Reflecting on the broader implications of the incident, Elena thought about how often systemic racism and unchecked power converged in spaces like the airline industry. It wasn't just about her being a black woman in a first-class seat. It was about what her presence symbolized and how threatening that could be to those unwilling to confront their biases. She had spent only a minute contacting her boyfriend, knowing he would be on board with the sailing. Elena's resolve hardened. This wasn't just a personal fight anymore. It was a fight for accountability, equality, and respect. As she gathered herself and prepared for the next steps, she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't back down. The fallout from the incident involving Elena Carter and Captain Richard Blake began almost immediately. By the time Elena left the airport, her story had started circulating online. Witnesses on the flight shared videos of the confrontation, capturing Captain Blake's dismissive tone and the security officers escorting Elena off the plane. Within hours, hashtags like "Justice for Elena" and "Airline Accountability" were trending across social media. For the airline, the timing couldn't have been worse. What began as a single passenger complaint rapidly snowballed into a full-blown public relations crisis. The company's PR team, led by seasoned strategist Susan Green, scrambled to contain the damage. Emergency meetings were called, statements were drafted, and plans were devised to address the growing outrage. We need to acknowledge the incident, emphasize our commitment to diversity, and assure the public that we are in charge of your well-being. Regulation flashes out, Susan insisted during a tense boardroom discussion. Despite their efforts, the airline faced mounting backlash. Media outlets picked up the story, with headlines condemning the treatment of Elena, a successful black entrepreneur, and questioning the airline's handling of the situation. The viral footage made it impossible for the airline to brush the incident under the rug. Public sentiment quickly turned against them, with customers threatening boycotts and civil rights organizations demanding accountability. Meanwhile, Captain Richard Blake remained oblivious to the storm brewing outside. In his mind, he had simply enforced protocol. However, that perspective shattered when he was called into a private meeting with the airline's leadership. "Captain Blake," Susan began, her tone sharp, "do you have any idea who Elena Carter is?" Blake frowned, confused. "She was a disruptive passenger who refused to comply," he replied defensively. Lee replied, "She's not just any passenger," Susan snapped, her voice rising. "She's the daughter of Gregory Carter, our CEO, and she's also a billionaire entrepreneur with a massive public following. Your actions have put this airline at the center of a national scandal." The color drained from Blake's face as realization struck. He had grossly underestimated the significance of his actions. Moments later, the airline suspended him pending a full investigation. It was clear to everyone in the room that his career was hanging by a thread. As the airline grappled with the fallout, Gregory Carter began leveraging his extensive network to ensure the situation was handled appropriately. Gregory wasn't just acting as a father seeking justice for his daughter. He was making a statement about the systemic racism and abuse of authority that allowed incidents like this to occur. Using his connections in the media and corporate world, Gregory amplified Elena's story, ensuring it remained in the public eye. He reached out to civil rights leaders, legal experts, and industry regulators, calling for an overhaul of airline policies to prevent similar incidents in the future. His efforts resonated, sparking a broader conversation about discrimination in the aviation industry. The future was. Elena, too, became a powerful voice in the narrative. While she hadn't sought the spotlight, she recognized the importance of her platform. In interviews and public statements, she spoke not just about her experience, but about the larger issues at play. "This isn't just about me," she said during a press conference. "It's about every person who has been made to feel like they don't belong. It's about demanding accountability and change." She initiated. The airline's leadership realized the gravity of the situation and attempted damage control. They issued an apology, promising a thorough investigation and pledging to implement diversity and sensitivity training for all employees. However, the public wasn't satisfied with empty promises. People wanted to see real accountability, and Captain Blake's suspension was only the beginning. He was badged out of flight instruction and was promptly fired for moseying with the ladies in the front. While the pilot continued to speak, the backlash extended beyond the airline. Other companies in the industry faced renewed scrutiny, with activists and advocacy groups pushing for comprehensive reforms. Elena's story had become a catalyst for a movement, shining a light on the pervasive discrimination faced by people of color in spaces dominated by power and privilege. This was starting to burden her very personal scene. and soon she found herself faced the same concern. As the days unfolded, Captain Blake found himself isolated. His suspension turned into termination as the airline sought to distance itself from him. Colleagues who once respected him now avoided his calls. Social media buzzed with demands for justice, and legal experts speculated about the lawsuits that were almost certain to follow. For Elena and Gregory, the fight was far from over. Gregory's influence ensured that systemic issues within the airline industry would be addressed, while Elena used her platform to advocate for lasting change. Together, they demonstrated that standing up against injustice could spark a movement, one that would reverberate far beyond the confines of a single flight. The fallout served as a stark reminder. Actions have consequences, and in an age of accountability, no one, no matter how powerful, can escape them. Henry's second letter, to Meryl Street. Presidency offers no protections, nothing more than a wimble report. The legal battle began with Elena Carter assembling a powerhouse legal team led by civil rights attorney Lisa Matthews. Known for her unyielding determination, Lisa was the perfect choice to take on both Captain Richard Blake and the airline. From the start, the case was about more than Elena's personal experience. It aimed to expose the systemic racism and abuses of authority that allowed such incidents to persist. Lisa and her team worked tirelessly, gathering evidence to build an airtight case. Videos of the confrontation on the plane were scrutinized, witness statements were collected, and the airline's policies were analyzed for inconsistencies. "We're not just fighting for justice for Elena," Lisa declared during a press conference. "We're fighting for everyone who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong." 2. Lisa deputed Wicker's lawyers for advice. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial, with reporters, activists, and curious onlookers eager to see justice unfold. Elena sat at the plaintiff's table alongside Lisa, her father Gregory Carter seated just behind her for support. Across the room, Captain Richard Blake sat with his defense team, his expression a mixture of defiance and unease. No one had a final word about what happened in the first few minutes of the court day. Some might even. Lisa opened the case with a powerful statement. "Your Honor, members of the jury, my client Elena Carter was subjected to blatant racial discrimination by Captain Richard Blake. Despite holding a valid first-class ticket, she was forcibly removed from her seat and humiliated in front of dozens of passengers. This is not just a case of misconduct. It is a reflection of systemic bias that must be addressed." "Sir," Lisa said with a bow from the knee as she sat down. "Your Honor." Elena took the stand to recount the events in her own words. Her voice was calm but firm as she described the humiliation of being treated as though she didn't belong. "I wasn't just removed from my seat that day," she said, her gaze steady. "I was stripped of my dignity. Captain Blake looked at me and decided, based on nothing but my appearance, that I didn't deserve to be there. He looked over my face." Her testimony was followed by statements from passengers who had witnessed the incident. One by one, they corroborated her account, painting a damning picture of Captain Blake's behavior. "He didn't even look at her ticket properly," one passenger said. "It was clear he had made up his mind before she even had a chance to explain." If it were the same woman who might be charged with murder, the defense struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. Their attempt to portray the incident as a misunderstanding fell flat under the weight of video footage and witness accounts. At one point, Captain Blake took the stand, but his testimony only deepened the perception of his guilt. His dismissive attitude and inability to justify his actions left a lasting impression on the jury. The turning point came during closing arguments when Lisa addressed the court one last time. "This case isn't just about one man or one airline," she said, her voice steady and impassioned. "It's about a culture that allows people in positions of power to act with impunity, to dismiss and devalue others based on the color of their skin. We have a chance today to say, no more." After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Captain Richard Blake was found guilty of racial discrimination and misconduct. The judge, known for her fair yet firm rulings, sentenced Blake to 12 months in prison for his actions and barred him from working in the aviation industry again. Blake was barred from the flight, requested a new title in the funeral director's office, and finally fined his house sent back to the city. The airline didn't escape unscathed either. In addition to losing the case, they were ordered to pay substantial damages to Elena and implement mandatory diversity training for all employees. The court also ruled that the airline must conduct an independent review of its policies to address systemic issues of bias. As the verdict was read, emotions ran high in the courtroom. Elena felt a mix of relief and vindication, tears welling in her eyes as she turned to her father. Gregory Carter, who had maintained his composure throughout the trial, gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You did it," he said quietly. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed Elena and her father as they emerged victorious. Cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, but Elena remained poised. "This is a step forward," she said into the microphones, "but the fight isn't over. This is about ensuring that no one else has to endure what I went through. We all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect." And the trial marked a turning point, not just for Elena but for the broader fight against discrimination. While the journey had been painful, it was also transformative. Elena's courage and determination had not only secured justice for herself, but had also shone a light on issues that demanded change. For her and Gregory, the battle was personal, but its impact would be felt far and wide. Fallout from Elena Carter's ordeal didn't just end in the courtroom. It sparked a nationwide conversation about systemic racism and accountability within the aviation industry and beyond. Elena's experience, while deeply personal, became a symbol of a much larger issue. The viral nature of her story brought attention to the discrimination faced by countless marginalized individuals in spaces dominated by power and privilege. He went to the computer, studying the complaints on the page on the screen. In the weeks following the trial, Elena used her platform to advocate for meaningful change. She partnered with civil rights organizations and spoke at public forums, sharing her story and calling for reforms in the aviation industry. "This isn't just about me," she said during one event. "It's about ensuring that no one, no matter their race, background, or status, is treated as though they don't belong," she added. Her funding for the Defense Fund procured the resources needed to address the issue, which was later determined to be a police matter, not one of civility. Elena's advocacy efforts extended beyond public appearances. She worked closely with industry leaders and policymakers, pushing for mandatory diversity and inclusion training for airline staff, updated protocols for passenger handling, and a transparent system for addressing complaints of discrimination. Her relentless pursuit of justice inspired many to join the movement, turning her personal struggle into a catalyst for industry-wide reform. In moments, the nation's bar was raised. The airline involved in the incident also faced immense pressure to demonstrate accountability. Public outrage and the legal verdict forced its leadership to take concrete steps toward change. In a public statement, the CEO apologized directly to Elena and pledged to overhaul the company's policies. He also pointed out the difference between the way people behave and the way someone is accused of doing something. "We failed Elena Carter, and we failed the values we claim to stand for. This incident has made it clear that we have a long way to go in fostering an inclusive and respectful environment for all passengers," the statement read. The airline announced several reforms, including mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all employees, the creation of an independent oversight board to review cases of passenger mistreatment, and a commitment to increasing diversity within its leadership ranks. While some viewed these steps as overdue, others saw them as a meaningful beginning toward rebuilding trust and addressing systemic issues. Cases from hence on would be filled by a person of color, not a white man. Elena's continued efforts to bring attention to the broader issues of racism and inequality resonated far beyond the aviation industry. Her story became a rallying cry for marginalized voices in other sectors, proving that even deeply entrenched systems of power could be challenged. As she reflected on her journey, Elena remained resolute. "This is about more than one flight or one airline," she said. "It's about breaking down barriers and building a future where everyone is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The next day, New York Times best-selling author Ruth Beckett's manual, Elena Carter's journey was more than a fight for justice. It was a testament to the power of resilience and courage in the face of adversity. From the moment she was unjustly removed from her seat, Elena refused to back down. Her determination not only secured accountability for Captain Richard Blake and the airline, but also ignited a national conversation on systemic racism and the abuse of authority. The Women Travelers Conference was designated the last resting place and the abuse of authority. Her story is a powerful reminder of what can be achieved when individuals stand up against discrimination. Elena didn't just fight for herself. She fought for every marginalized voice that has been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed. Her courage in confronting injustice resonated far beyond her personal experience, inspiring others to speak out and demand change. As we reflect on Elena's bravery, it's clear that her journey isn't just a story. It's a call to action for all of us. Discrimination and systemic inequality persist in countless industries and spaces, and it's our collective responsibility to challenge them. Elena's story shows that change is possible, but it begins with individuals who are willing to stand firm and refuse to be silent. Now it's your turn to make a difference. Share Elena's story to amplify her message and spark conversations about the injustices that still exist today. Talk to your friends, family, and colleagues about the importance of inclusion and accountability. Support organizations and initiatives working to create a more equitable society. Stay with us, because behind the family's wonderful heritage stands the justice system. Keep it up. Enjoy the ride. We can't afford to stay silent in the face of discrimination. Every voice matters in the fight for justice, and together, we can create a world where no one is made to feel as though they don't belong. As Elena said in one of her public statements, change doesn't happen on its own. It happens when we stand up, speak out, and demand better. And let this story be a reminder that even in moments of great injustice, there is an opportunity to make a difference. Let it inspire you to act, to challenge unfair systems, and to advocate for those who cannot fight for themselves. This book was written because my first book several years earlier had been published under a different name. Change begins with all of us, and as we've seen from Elena's journey, change begins when we refuse to be silent. End quote. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and share it with others who might find it inspiring. And if you want more real-life stories that challenge perspectives and inspire change, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, let's continue to explore the stories that matter and remind the world that respect and kindness are always the right choice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Gil.